He was still talking when she stood up. Her chair scraped a little, not dramatic, just wood on hardwood. My brother didn't stop. And honestly, it just shows what discipline can do when you remove distractions, he said, smiling like he was finishing a toast. People laughed, light, automatic. Then my niece stood. No one told her to sit back down. She didn't look at him first, that was the part I noticed. She looked at the table edge, like she was checking something only she could see. I remember my hand tightening around my glass. I wasn't drinking. "You can sit, sweetheart," my brother said, still smiling. She shook her head once. Small movement, final. The room didn't know what to do with that. I didn't either. Earlier, the house had felt too clean. That kind of clean that means someone hired help and still checked everything twice. Harvard acceptance dinner. That's what they called it, like it was a category of event people practiced for. My brother stood at the head of the table like he owned the wood under it. He kept touching his cufflinks, even though they didn't need adjusting. "She's always had potential," he said at one point. "You just need structure, consistency." His wife smiled like she was following a script she didn't write. My niece sat between them at first. Then later she drifted closer to me, not obvious, just enough that her shoulder almost touched mine. No one commented on it. They never really saw how people moved toward me when things got real. Only when things needed fixing. I raised her from 4. That's the simple version people like. 4 years old, standing in a doorway with a backpack too big for her body, asking when her dad was coming home. He was busy then. He stayed busy. Busy turned into years. I learned how to sign school forms that weren't mine to sign. How to answer doctors without hesitating. How to say guardian in a voice that didn't sound like I was borrowing the word. At first I corrected people. "She's my niece," I'd say. Then I stopped correcting them. It was easier when I became whatever they needed me to be in that moment. At school meetings, they looked at me longer than necessary. At family gatherings, they looked at me less than necessary. That balance stayed consistent. My brother didn't like inconsistency. He liked order, but only the kind he controlled. When he showed up, he brought gifts instead of time. Shoes that were slightly too expensive for the school she went to. Birthday dinners where he arrived after cake. He'd pat her head like he was checking a report. "She's doing well," he'd say. "Good genes." I remember once correcting him quietly. "She needs help with math." He didn't look at me. "She'll figure it out." And he walked into the kitchen like the conversation ended there. It did. At the dinner, someone mentioned Harvard again. My aunt clapped too loudly. My uncle asked about majors like it was trivia. My brother leaned back, satisfied. "She made it," he said. "Hard work, focus, no distractions." He glanced at me when he said distractions. It wasn't subtle. It never had to be. I remember thinking how easy it is to rewrite history when no one interrupts you. No one interrupted him for years. Because I didn't. I thought silence was stability. Turns out it's permission. Now she was standing. Still. Her hands were at her sides. Not shaking. That surprised me more than anything. My brother finally stopped talking. "You're being dramatic," he said, softer now. Like he was correcting a child in public. She exhaled once. I wasn't going to say anything she said. Her voice wasn't loud. That made it worse for him. People leaned forward slightly. Subconscious. Like sound had changed frequency. I felt my name before she said it. That's what I remember most. Not the words yet. Just the anticipation of being seen. For once. When she was younger, she used to ask me things at night. Not big questions. Small ones. Why doesn't he stay longer? I don't know. That's not an answer. I'd fix her blanket instead of replying. That became my habit. Fixing things instead of answering them. Because answers didn't change outcomes. Only routines did. I made her routines. Breakfast, school, silence when needed, talking when safe. She learned the pattern. So did I. At the dinner table, my brother finally laughed again. A short laugh, nervous maybe. "She's emotional," he said to the room. "It's a big moment." No one laughed with him this time. That silence shifted something. I saw it happen in faces first. Not in words. In the way people stopped looking at him directly, Then she said my name. Not loudly. Just clearly. And I realized I had been waiting for this moment longer than I knew how to admit. Not for credit. For accuracy. Before any of this, there was a day I signed a school form alone. Rain outside, cheap pen, lobby chair that stuck to my coat. The receptionist asked parent or guardian. I hesitated. 1 second too long. Guardian, I said. It felt like stepping over something I couldn't step back from. My brother didn't even know I'd done it. He didn't need to. That was the arrangement. I carried what didn't fit into his life. He carried the name. Now she was still standing. And the room wasn't breathing the same anymore. My brother looked at me finally fully. Not smiling now? Just waiting. Like I was supposed to fix this too. I didn't move. Neither did she. And for the first time in 14 years, I wasn't the one being asked to explain anything. Not yet. But I could feel it coming apart. Slowly. Quietly. Right there in front of everyone. She didn't sit back down. That was the first thing I noticed. My brother's smile was gone now. Not fully, just stretched thin like it didn't belong on his face anymore. Sweetheart, he said again, slower this time. We're celebrating, let's not. She looked at him. Not angry, not scared either. Just finished listening. I am celebrating, she said. A pause. Then she added, that's why I'm standing. No one reacted immediately. That kind of sentence needs time to land. I felt it land before anyone else did. My brother shifted in his chair. He did that thing he always did when control slipped, adjusted something physical. His watch this time, thumb pressing the edge. That doesn't make sense, he said lightly. Too lightly. She nodded once. I know what you said, she replied. Her voice didn't rise. That mattered more than volume ever could. People started doing small things, forks down, napkins folded twice, no eye contact. The room was quietly reorganizing itself around her instead of him. He noticed. Of course he did. I said you made it, he said, trying to bring it back. Harvard doesn't happen without structure, without direction. He looked at the table as he said it. Not her. That was his pattern. Talk around people, not to them. My niece didn't move. I had structure, she said. A beat. And direction. She turned slightly then, not toward him. Toward me. That was when my stomach dropped low and slow. Not fear. Recognition. Because I knew that look. That was the look you give when you're done protecting someone's version of reality. She wasn't asking permission anymore. She was correcting something. My brother noticed the shift toward me too. His eyes flicked. Quick. Then back to her. Okay, he said, smiling again, but wrong. If this is about gratitude. It's not, she interrupted. The word wasn't loud. But it cut clean. Silence again. This time heavier. Someone coughed into a napkin like it might fix the air. It didn't. Nah. I remember the first time I realized she was paying attention to everything. She was 8. We were at a grocery store. She pointed at a woman ahead of us paying with food stamps. She didn't ask loudly. Just whispered, why does she look embarrassed? I said, because people make it feel that way. She didn't answer. But she stopped asking questions like a child after that. Started asking like someone collecting evidence. Now at the table she took a small breath. Not dramatic. Controlled. I got into Harvard, she said. My brother nodded quickly. Yes, exactly, that's what I'm saying. No? She said it gently. But it stopped him mid-word. She looked at him directly now. Finally. I got in, she said, because she made sure I could apply. The word she didn't land at first. Then it did. I felt it before I saw it in faces. People recalibrating again. My aunt looked down at her plate like it had become interesting. My uncle stopped chewing. My brother's jaw tightened. That's not necessary, he said. There it was. Control language. Not denial yet. Containment. She didn't respond to that. She just kept going. She signed the forms, she said. She met with teachers. She stayed up with me when I couldn't sleep before exams. A pause. She worked 2 jobs while I was applying. That last part wasn't emotional. It was factual. And facts are harder to interrupt. My hands moved under the table without me noticing, fingers pressing into my palm. A grounding habit I didn't know I still had. No one was looking at me yet. But they would. That was the direction this was moving. Slowly. Like gravity finally remembered my name. My brother let out a short laugh. Not real. More like disbelief trying to disguise itself. That's no, he said. I supported you both. He looked around the table now, searching for agreement. People didn't give it. Not quickly enough. That hesitation hurt him more than disagreement would have. She tilted her head slightly. You sent money, she said. No emotion attached. Just classification. Sometimes. A pause. Not consistently. That word hung there. Consistently. It did more damage than anything before it. Because everyone at that table understood what inconsistency means when you're the one depending on it. But I remember every gap. Every time rent was late. Every form I covered quietly. Every explanation I gave teachers that started with her father is complicated. Complicated was my favorite lie. It made things sound neutral. They weren't. My brother pushed his chair back slightly. Not fully standing. Just enough to signal discomfort. This is inappropriate, he said. She didn't react to that either. I'm not done, she said. And that was the first time the room stopped seeing her as polite. Something changed after that. Not loud. Just irreversible. Like a door closing without sound. She looked at me again. Longer this time. And I understood what was coming next before she said it. Not the words. The direction. Toward truth. Unfiltered. Finally uncontained. And no one at that table, not even my brother, looked ready for it. She didn't raise her voice. That's what made it worse. I was a child, she said. A pause. Then she wasn't. No one moved. Not immediately. My brother blinked once slow, like his brain was trying to reject the sentence before it fully arrived. That's enough, he said. But it didn't carry authority anymore. It sounded like habit. My niece kept standing. Same posture. Like she could stay there all night if she had to. I had school meetings, she said. She was there. Another pause. I had doctors. She was there. Her eyes flicked briefly around the table, not for approval, more like confirmation that reality was still shared. It wasn't. Not evenly. My brother leaned forward now. You're confused, he said, softer, almost kind. That tone used to work. It didn't work now. She shook her head. I'm not confused. A beat. You just weren't there. That sentence didn't land like an accusation. It landed like an observation she'd carried for years and finally put down. I felt my throat tighten. Not because I was surprised. Because I wasn't. That was the problem. I had lived inside this truth so long it stopped feeling like something that could be said out loud. It just was. In forms. In calendars. In late-night lights still on after everyone else went to sleep. My brother looked at me again. This time slower. Like he was recalculating the room. You're letting her do this, he asked. Not loud. But sharp underneath. I didn't answer immediately. That silence did something I didn't expect. It didn't protect me. It exposed me. My niece turned toward him fully now. I'm not doing anything to her, she said. Then after a pause. I'm describing what happened. Simple. Clean. No anger in it. That was the most disarming part. Someone at the table shifted in their seat. I heard glass touch wood. A fork placed down carefully. Small sounds filling the gaps where argument used to go. No one wanted to be the first to label what this was becoming. So they didn't. They just watched it happen. My brother exhaled through his nose. I provided for you, he said again. But it sounded thinner now. Less certain. Like repetition had replaced conviction. My niece nodded slightly. Yes. That surprised him. She didn't argue the money. She never did. She just separated it from something else. I'm grateful for that, she said. A pause. Then. But that's not the same as raising me. No pause for reaction. She kept going. She did that. Her hand moved slightly toward me. Not dramatic. Barely noticeable. But every eye followed it anyway. That was the moment I felt the room shift fully. Not toward chaos. Toward clarity. Which is more dangerous. Because once people understand something, they can't unknow it. Even if they pretend to. My brother's face changed. Not anger yet. Something closer to panic. Don't do this here, he said. Lower now. Almost pleading. But still framed as control. Still trying to contain the shape of the conversation. She didn't stop. I didn't know how much she gave up, she said. Then corrected herself. I think I knew. I just didn't have words for it then. A pause. I do now. That was new. Not the truth. The timing. I remember the nights she studied at the kitchen table. Her head down. My presence behind her like background noise she trusted. Sometimes I'd pretend to be working just so she wouldn't feel alone. Sometimes I actually was working. It blurred. Most of those years blurred. My brother pushed his chair back again. This time it scraped louder. You're rewriting things, he said. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. She looked at him. No, she said. I'm finally not rewriting them. That line changed the air. Something in the room stopped resisting her. Not everyone. But enough. My aunt whispered something to my uncle. I couldn't hear it. But I saw his response. A small shake of the head. Not disagreement. Uncertainty. That kind of uncertainty spreads, quietly. My niece took one step closer to the table. Still standing. Still steady. I didn't succeed in spite of her, she said. A pause. I succeeded because she didn't leave. No drama in it. Just structure. Like a fact finally put in its correct place. I felt my chest tighten again. This time not from exposure. From being seen accurately. There's a difference. One hurts. The other unsettles everything you built your identity on. My brother looked at me fully now. No mask left. Just something raw underneath. You told her this, he asked. I didn't answer. Because I hadn't. Not like this. I didn't need to. My niece answered for me. She didn't have to. A pause. I watched her. That was the quietest line in the room. And the heaviest. Because it meant everything I thought I was hiding had never actually been hidden. No one spoke after that. Not immediately. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of reevaluation. People rearranging entire memories in real time. Trying to decide what kind of truth they were willing to live with. My brother finally sat back down. Slowly. Like standing had become too expensive. He looked at the table. Not at her. Not at me. At nothing in particular. And for the first time in 14 years, he didn't have a version of the story ready fast enough to save himself. The silence didn't break. It just changed shape. Less shock now, more calculation. People at the table started doing that thing where they suddenly become very interested in their drinks, their napkins, the edge of the table, anywhere except the center of the room. My brother stayed seated. That was new. He always stood when he wanted control back. Now he didn't. She's tired, he said finally. Not to my niece. To the room. Like he was translating her. She didn't respond. Didn't even look at him this time. That hurt him more than anything she'd said so far. I think we're misunderstanding each other, he added. A reset attempt. Soft tone. Carefully chosen words. The same way he used to speak in meetings when something didn't go his way. My niece exhaled slowly. I don't think we are. Simple. Final. No invitation to continue. I felt the shift before I saw it in anyone else. It wasn't loud. It was social withdrawal. People leaning back slightly. Creating distance without moving their chairs. The room was starting to decide what version of reality was safest to stand near. My brother turned his head toward me again. This time slower. He wasn't asking anymore. He was trying to anchor something. You were struggling too, he said. Carefully. Like we were back in shared language. I didn't answer right away. Because the problem wasn't whether I struggled. It was what I did while I was struggling. My niece spoke before I did. She didn't struggle, she said. A pause. She carried it. No emotion. Just placement. That sentence did something worse than accusation. It removed ambiguity. My brother frowned. That's not fair, he said. It came out instinctively. Like fairness was still a functioning system in this conversation. My niece nodded once. I agree. That surprised him. She wasn't fighting fairness. She was defining it differently. I didn't ask her to do all that he said quickly. Too quickly. That's when people start revealing what they're afraid is already true. My niece tilted her head slightly. No, she said. You didn't ask. A pause. You left. No extra words. No moral framing. Just sequence. I remember that day. The second time he left. He packed a bag like he was going somewhere temporary. He said he needed space. Space turned into distance. Distance turned into years. Years turned into me learning how to stop waiting for him and start managing what he refused to manage. At the table now, my brother's fingers tapped once against the wood, then stopped. He looked around the room again, searching for alignment. It wasn't there in the way he needed. People weren't rejecting him. They were just no longer reinforcing him. That's different and more dangerous. My niece finally sat down. Not suddenly. Slowly. Like the standing part of her statement was complete. That shift changed the energy again. Now she wasn't confronting. She was done. That's what people missed. But I was still standing internally, if that makes sense. Not physically. Just aware of everything I had held in place without permission. Schedules, school meetings, medical decisions. All the invisible infrastructure of a life that had grown without a label. My brother cleared his throat. We can talk about this later, he said. Relief strategy. Delay. Containment through postponement. No one answered. Because everyone understood what later usually meant in this family. Nothing. My niece looked at me again. Longer this time. Not asking. Acknowledging. I didn't know what you gave up, she said quietly. I nodded once. That was all I had left in me in that moment. Because if I spoke, I wasn't sure it would come out clean. My brother noticed that exchange. His jaw tightened again. This time not defensive. Displaced. Like the center of the room had moved and he wasn't included in the new coordinates. That's not what this is, he said. But no one asked what this was anymore. A chair shifted somewhere. My uncle stood halfway, then sat again. Changed his mind in real time. That small hesitation told me more than any speech could have. People were starting to choose silence over loyalty. Not all at once, but enough to matter. My brother leaned forward again. Lower voice now. Directed at me. You should have told me, he said. And there it was. The old expectation. That I was responsible for informing him about the consequences of his absence. I didn't respond immediately. Because I had tried. Years ago. Quietly. Repeatedly. And stopped when it became clear he only heard things that preserved his image. My niece stood again briefly. Not fully. Just enough to speak clearly. She did, she said. A pause. You didn't stay long enough to hear it. Then she sat back down. That was it. No emphasis. No performance. Just finality. My brother's face changed again. Not anger now. Something more private. Something like realization, trying to find a way out without collapsing everything he built. But there wasn't a way out. Not cleanly. Not anymore. And I realized something in that moment. This wasn't a confrontation. Not really. It was a correction that had taken 14 years to arrive at the right table. And now it was done arriving. No one spoke. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because anything said now would be recorded differently than intended. And everyone felt that. The plates were still on the table. No one touched them anymore. Food had become something else in the room decoration, maybe, proof that this was supposed to be normal dinner. My brother stared at his glass. Not drinking, just holding it like it could give him time. My niece sat still. But it wasn't the same stillness as before. Before she was listening. Now she was done waiting. "You're turning this into something it isn't," my brother said finally. He didn't look at her. He looked at me when he said it. That mattered. It always did. She answered anyway. "I'm not turning anything." A pause. "I'm just not leaving parts out anymore." My brother exhaled sharply, like the air itself was arguing with him. "This is disrespectful," he said. But the word didn't land like authority. It landed like discomfort looking for a name. My niece nodded slightly. "I know." That was all she gave him. No resistance. No apology. Just acknowledgement that she understood how he labeled truth. I felt something shift in my chest again. Not surprise. Clarity. It was happening in layers now. Not a reveal. An unstacking. Years of arrangement losing their structure one sentence at a time. My brother finally looked at her directly again. "You were a child," he said. "That's why I made decisions." My niece tilted her head. "You weren't there to make them." Quiet. Clean. Irreversible. The room went still in a different way after that. Not awkward. Not tense. Just sealed. Like something had been decided without consensus. People were no longer reacting. They were registering. I remember the moment I stopped calling him for advice. She was 12. Homework spread across the table. She asked me if she should still try calling him about school. I said, "You can." She waited. Then asked, "Will he answer?" I didn't lie. I don't know. She didn't try again after that. Now my brother shifted in his chair. A small movement. But everyone saw it. He was losing the rhythm of control. That's what it looked like when it started slipping small physical corrections that no longer fixed anything. "You're punishing me for working," he said. It came out quieter than he intended. There was vulnerability in it now. Not enough to soften what he'd done, but enough to show what he feared losing. My niece shook her head. "No." A pause. "I'm just not pretending it was enough." That sentence hit differently. Because it didn't accuse. It measured. And measurement is harder to argue with than emotion. My aunt cleared her throat. No one looked at her. She stopped halfway through whatever she was about to say. That hesitation spread again. Like people were collectively unsure whether speaking would stabilize the room or collapse it further. My brother leaned back. For the first time that night he looked smaller. Not physically. Just less anchored. "You always did this," he said to me suddenly. There it was. The pivot. Back to me. Not her. Me. As if I were still the one holding the system together. I didn't answer right away. Because part of me had expected that. The return. The attempt to reassign responsibility. That had always been my role in his version of the world. The stabilizer. The absorber. The one who fixed without being credited. My niece looked at me again. Not interrupting. Just present. And I realized she wasn't waiting for me to defend myself. She was waiting to see if I still would. "I didn't do anything," my brother continued. His voice tightened. "I gave you trust." That word again. Trust. Used like currency. My niece exhaled softly. "You gave distance," she said. A pause. Not trust. Something in his expression cracked slightly. Not dramatic. Just subtle misalignment. Like he was realizing the language he used wasn't being accepted anymore. Not emotionally. Structurally. I finally spoke. Not to defend him. Not to attack him. Just truth as it existed in my body. I stopped waiting, I said. That was it. No explanation after. No justification. Just the line. The room reacted more to that than anything else. Because it wasn't accusation. It was absence. And absence is harder to argue against than presence. My brother looked at me for a long time, like he was trying to find the version of me he still understood. He didn't. Because I wasn't there anymore in the way he remembered. I hadn't been for a while. My niece stood up again. Not fully. Just enough to signal she was done speaking. "I'm going to finish school," she said. A pause. "I'm going to call her." Then she looked at me. Just briefly. And added, "Not you. That wasn't rejection. It was correction of distance." Gee. My brother didn't respond this time. Not because he had nothing left to say, but because every possible sentence now sounded like it belonged to a version of the room that no longer existed. And I realized something sitting there. There wasn't going to be a final argument. No resolution moment. No clean collapse. Just a quiet redistribution of who mattered in the story going forward. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for my place in it. My brother didn't leave the table. That was the first strange thing. He just stayed there like standing up would make it real. The food went cold between us. Nobody reached for anything anymore, even the glasses stopped moving. My niece picked up her phone once, checked it, put it down again. Like life outside the room still existed but wasn't urgent. "You planned this," my brother said suddenly. Not loud. Flat. Like he was testing whether the idea fit. My niece didn't look up from the table. "No." A pause. "I just stopped pretending." That word pretending sat differently in the room. It didn't accuse anyone. It just removed comfort. My brother let out a short breath through his nose. "You're being influenced," he said. Now it sounded like a defense he could still recognize. Something external. Something he could blame without looking at himself directly. My niece finally looked at him again. "I was raised here," she said. A beat. "I don't need influence to notice things." The silence after that lasted longer than the words. Someone at the far end of the table shifted their chair back slightly. Not leaving. Just adjusting distance from responsibility. I noticed it. Small things become loud when nothing else is happening. My brother turned toward me again. His voice changed. Lower. Less performative now. "This is what you wanted," he asked. I didn't answer immediately. Because I had to think about what this even meant. Truth. Or exposure. Or just the end of a role I never agreed to but still lived inside. I didn't want anything I said finally. It was honest. But incomplete. Because wanting requires permission to imagine alternatives. I had stopped doing that a long time ago. My niece spoke again quietly. She didn't want credit, she said. A pause. She wanted things to stay stable. That sentence landed harder than anything else she had said. Because it was accurate. And accuracy doesn't leave room for argument. My brother rubbed his thumb against his palm. A nervous habit I remembered from years ago. Meetings, phones, moments when he was trying to control outcomes without controlling behavior. It didn't work then either. Just less visible. "You're making me look like I did nothing," he said. There it was. Not guilt. Image. The thing underneath everything else. My niece shook her head once. "I'm not making you look like anything." A pause. "I'm telling what happened when you weren't here." That distinction mattered. Everyone felt it. Because what happened doesn't require interpretation. Only acceptance. And acceptance was suddenly the most expensive thing in the room. My aunt finally spoke. Carefully. "Maybe we should," she started. She stopped halfway. No one asked her to continue. That was new too. People were losing the instinct to mediate. My brother exhaled again longer this time. "You're turning her against me," he said to me. Not question. Statement. Old framework trying to survive? I looked at him then. Really looked. And I realized something simple. He still thought there was a center. And that I was standing in it. "There is no against," I said. A pause. "That's what you don't understand." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even firm. It was just tired clarity. My niece nodded slightly at that. Like she'd already arrived there earlier. She stood up again slowly. Not leaving. Just reclaiming space. I'm going to stay with her tonight, she said. Not asking. Informing. My brother blinked. Once, then again. You don't need to do that, he said quickly. A reflex. Control disguised as care. My niece looked at him. I do. Short. No debate in it. That was when I saw it. Not anger. Not defeat. Displacement. He no longer knew what role he was in. And people like him struggle most when the script disappears. She walked around the table slightly. Not toward the exit. Toward me. And stopped beside my chair. Just standing there. Close enough that I could hear her breathing. I remember everything you did, she said quietly. Not for the room. Just for me. A pause. Even when I didn't understand it. I didn't respond immediately. Because anything I said would reduce it. And I didn't want to reduce it. My brother stood up finally. Too late to matter in the same way it used to. But he stood anyway. We'll talk later, he said again. But it sounded like something people say when they've run out of other endings. No one answered him. Not this time. He looked around the table once. Looking for agreement. There wasn't any available. Not in the way he needed. My niece took my hand briefly. Not emotional. Just grounding. Then let go. I'm going to finish packing, she said. And walked out of the room. My brother stayed standing. But the room didn't stay with him. Not anymore. And I realized sitting there in the quiet after she left, that nothing had exploded. Nothing dramatic had happened. But something had ended anyway. Quietly. Completely. Without permission. The house felt different after she left. Not quieter. Just unfinished. Like a conversation paused mid-sentence and nobody trusted themselves to continue it. My brother was still standing near the table. But he wasn't doing anything with that position anymore. It looked accidental now. You shouldn't have let that happen, he said finally. Not loud. Tired more than angry. I looked at him. He was still trying to assign control to someone in the room. Anyone, really. As long as it wasn't him. I didn't let anything happen, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. That was the difference now. There was nothing left to manage. Only record. He shook his head slightly. This is going to ruin things, he said. That word things meant everything and nothing at the same time. Family, reputation, image. He didn't specify. He never had to. I stood up slowly. My legs felt normal. That surprised me. Like I expected my body to still be carrying years of weight that didn't belong to it anymore. But it wasn't. Or at least not the same weight. What exactly is ruined, I asked. Not challenging. Just curious. That made him pause. Because he didn't have a clean answer that didn't expose something else. He ran a hand through his hair. A small, restless movement. She doesn't understand context, he said. A reflex again. Trying to rebuild authority through explanation. I nodded once. I think she understands more than you think. That landed differently than anything I had said before. Not louder. Just final in a quieter way. He looked at me for a long moment. Like he was seeing me without the role attached for the first time. It made him uncomfortable. I could tell. People don't like seeing versions of others they didn't authorize. You're not supposed to agree with her, he said. Almost softly. That sentence said more than he intended. It meant the family had assigned roles, and I had stepped outside mine. I'm not agreeing, I said. A pause. I'm just not correcting her anymore. That distinction mattered, even if he didn't understand it yet. He sat down again. Slowly. Like standing had taken more from him than expected. His chair made a soft sound against the floor. It felt louder than it should have. For a while, neither of us spoke. The table between us looked too big now. Not physically. Just socially. Like it had expanded to fit distance. He finally spoke again. What happens now, he asked. Not to me exactly. More like into the space. The space where certainty used to be. I thought about that. Honestly, because for the first time I didn't feel responsible for the answer. That realization was new, uncomfortable, but clear. I don't know, I said. And I meant it. There was no script for after this. Only consequences unfolding at their own pace. He nodded slowly. But it wasn't agreement. It was something closer to fatigue accepting its limits. Outside I heard a car door earlier. Probably hers. I hadn't moved to check. I didn't need to. I could feel her absence like a shift in pressure. Not painful. Just real. My brother stood again halfway, then stopped. He looked at me. You raised her against me, he said quietly. No anger now. Just confusion trying to find shape. I shook my head. I raised her, I said. A pause. That's it. Nothing more. Nothing less. He didn't respond to that, because there was nothing left in it for him to reinterpret. I walked toward the hallway. Not quickly. No urgency anymore. The house didn't feel like it needed managing. For the first time in years. In the hallway mirror, I saw myself. Not different. Just unassigned. That's the closest word I have for it. Unassigned. My brother called my name once behind me. I stopped. Didn't turn around immediately. That pause mattered. You could have handled this better, he said. Old language. Default language. I finally looked back. I did, I said, and kept walking. At the door I paused. Not because I was unsure. Because endings deserve a second of acknowledgement. Even quiet ones. I stepped outside. The air felt colder than I expected. Or maybe just less crowded. Behind me, the house stayed still. No collapse. No dramatic rupture. Just a system no longer being maintained. And I realized something simple walking away. I hadn't been waiting for recognition. Not really. I had been waiting for permission to stop explaining. I didn't need it anymore.